So again, just thank you for taking time out to learn more about this important topic of suicide. So my name is Bonnie Van Veen. I'll be your host for the next hour. I am not an expert on suicide, but like you, I'm looking forward to increasing my knowledge and understanding of this topic, as well as better equipping myself to help and to support those who may be in need. So we do have an interactive session planned for you this evening, and look forward to your participation in some posted polls throughout the talk. So we do ask you to keep your microphones muted throughout the presentations, but as questions or thoughts arise, we encourage you to use the chat option, and later towards the end of the session, we will be reviewing the questions and have a little bit of a Q&A. So we do encourage you to use the speaker view option at the top right hand of your screen. That will allow you to see who is speaking. And also to let you know, the session will be recorded and can be watched at a later date on the Wainfleet Be in Christ YouTube channel. So we are privileged this evening to have such a knowledgeable panel and 3 guest speakers to lead us through the discussion. So our first speaker that we'll be speaking with is Andrea Groenewald. She's a registered psychotherapist. She's founder and CEO of 5 Star Relationships, a business that works with individuals, couples, and organizations to provide counseling services, interactive presentations, build high-performing teams, and optimize organizational success. Andrea is involved in her community, serving on the board of her local chapter of Rotary International. She's been married to her husband, Jeff, for 33 years and has 2 children who both live in Toronto. Andrea enjoys traveling and trying to improve her golf game. So Andrea, we look forward to hearing from you later.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Our next panelist, Nicole Smith, has been involved in the battle against suicide since 2012. Out of a heart for preventing teen suicide and self-harm, she founded You're Worth More Ministries and speaks a message of hope and love through a wide variety of creative and innovative avenues pointing people towards Jesus Christ. Nicole offers workshops equipping anyone who wants us to learn about important suicide intervention skills through ASIST and Safe Talk training. Nicole's married to her husband, Ron, and has 2 adult children, Michelle and Marcel. Thanks, Nicole, for joining us tonight. When we were planning the evening, I was just relieved when Nicole said, "Oh, I can talk all night, whoever wants to talk about suicide." So I'm like, perfect, that's great. So we'll look forward to hearing what Nicole has for us.
Thank you very much.
Our third panelist is Trevor Main, who currently serves as pastor of discipleship and care at Wainfleet Be in Christ Church. Trevor's 25 years of experience as a pastor and missionary has provided opportunities for him to serve many different people across Ontario and in the countries of Venezuela and Colombia in South America. In 2010, Trevor suffered a severe bout of depression, but today is very grateful to have survived that dark chapter in his life and once again enjoys life. Trevor and his wife Sherry have been married for 30 years and are blessed with a son and daughter, and most recently, a sweet granddaughter. Trevor, we look forward to you sharing with us tonight. So as we know, suicide is not a popular discussion topic, and when discussed, often causes discomfort or division, but is a very real concern in society today, and we believe it needs to be talked about. So Andrea, please start us off with some statistics and share with us from some of your experiences in working with people and suicide.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. As Bonnie said, my name's Andrea. I live in Guelph with my husband. We have 2 adult kids. And like you guys, I'm doing my best to cope with this crazy COVID thing, and hope that everyone's hanging in there. So first I want to say that suicide really does affect us all, whether it's in our community, we know somebody personally, or we hear it in the news. It's all around us. It's a significant topic. It's an important topic. It's often difficult to talk about. And that's why we really wanted to host this evening, was to give a little bit of information, how you can help somebody who's maybe having a hard time, and and let you basically have some tools, some real tools, and how to deal with it. It's often a topic that I find when it comes up, we're not quite sure what to say. And even as a young therapist, I remember talking about suicide. It was like when people would talk about it, it was a little nerve-wracking. I wasn't always confident that I knew what to say. So again, hopefully we'll be able to address that tonight. So I am going to start off, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start off with some statistics just to give us a lay of the land about suicide and stats in Canada. And we're going to also look at some of the statistics that are specific to the pandemic over the past 7 months. And we're also going to debunk some myths about suicide. So let me just take a moment to share my screen here so you can see what I'm looking at. And we'll start with this one. So first of all, we often will hear statistics and we won't realize they're from the United States. So I wanted to start off by addressing suicide rates that you may have heard about. In the US, there's been a 30% increase in suicide rates from 1999. So that's really, really significant, 30%. Nearly 45,000 lives were lost to suicide in 2016. And those statistics are from the Centers for Disease Prevention. In Canada, we've been a little more fortunate. There's been a decrease from 13.4 per 100,000 Canadian residents in 1999 to 11.3 in 2017. So you can see that in Canada, there's been a little bit of a decrease, but still significant, 4,157 deaths by suicide in 2017. So what we're talking about is a significant issue. It's the 9th leading cause of death in Canada. That's overall in all age groups. And I thought you might be interested to know that Canada ranks 34th out of 107 nations globally for suicide deaths. So, you know, we're not the worst, we're not the best, we're kind of somewhere in between. And those statistics are from the Canadian Vital Statistics Death Database. Some important trends that I think are really important to know is that males are 3 times more likely to die by suicide. So just think about that for a minute. And then females are 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. And there's reasons for that. I don't know if we want to get into that a little bit later, but we may or may not. It's also very important to know in Canada that the suicide rate in Nunavut rose to exceed 800 per 100,000 compared to 14 per 100,000 in the general population from 1999 to 2003. So really important trends. It's a significant issue. And it's something that I'm glad we're talking about, again, to kind of get the scope of the problem that we're looking at and to provide some insight into it and really some tools on how to deal with it. One other thing I wanted to highlight was over the past 7 months with the pandemic, it's really like a terrible psych experiment. We would never be able to conduct such an experiment. It would be considered much too unethical. But what we've done is with the pandemic is we've put everyone into stress behavior, and then we've taken away a lot of their strategies to cope with stress. And so in the pandemic, in the past 7 months, we've seen a real increase on mental health illness and mental health issues. A lot around addictions, and suicide rates have gone up as well. And so I wanted to kind of give you some insight into how the pandemic has really impacted this topic of suicide. So in 2019, 2.5% of Canadians reported having suicidal thoughts. Currently, 6% or 1 in 20 Canadians are having suicidal thoughts. So if you put that into context and you think about the people that you're around every day in your community, whether it's out grocery shopping or driving, or if you ever are in, you know, a group of people or on a call like tonight, just think about that ratio of 1 in 20 are having suicidal thoughts. So thankfully, not everybody who has a suicidal thought acts on it, but I do want to bring this up to show that it's a really pervasive issue in our society, and we don't talk about it a ton. I also wanted to highlight the at-risk groups so you can be aware of that. People who have pre-existing mental illness are higher by 18%, so they have a risk factor increased by 18%. Indigenous people, increased risk of 16%. People with a disability, 15%. And people who identify as LGBTQ+, 14%. And parents with children under 18, 9%. Okay, and this is all in the context of the pandemic. So these are groups of people that really are at additional risk of suicidal ideation and also acting on suicide. So now we want to switch to sort of debunk some myths. There's a lot of things that we know about suicide. There's a lot of things that we think about suicide. So I thought it would be fun to kind of do some polls and ask some questions and kind of have a little bit of an interaction and see how smart our group is tonight. So we're going to start off by question number 1, and you'll be able to see how you can vote on your screen. Just click on whether you think that statement is true or false. So question number 1, suicide affects only individuals who already have a mental illness, true or false? And then click on the submit button there, and we'll tally up how many people say true and how many people say false. And Julie's gonna let us know, look at that, false, 97%. I knew we were gonna have like a really smart group here tonight. I just knew it. So mental illness is the most important risk factor for suicide. Stats Canada reports that more than 90% of people who die by suicide have a mental illness, usually depression or an addiction. However, suicide does not happen only to people with a pre-diagnosed mental illness. In fact, some statistics show that 54% of individuals who died by suicide did not have a diagnosable mental illness. So as you can see, there's some differences in reporting, there's some differences in statistics, but what I'd really like you to understand and really get is that that's not the only reason people die by suicide. And often it's the case that there's more than one risk factor involved, okay? So Julie, I'm gonna get you to post the second question. And the second one is, talking about suicide may increase the risk of someone self-harming. True or false? Talking about suicide may increase the risk of someone self-harming. Here comes the answer. Oh my gosh, 15% to 85%. Okay, so the answer is false. And so good for you guys. You're doing well. You're scoring probably better than my GPA in my undergrad. So even if you don't know what to say, letting someone know that you're happy to see them. I recently ran into somebody I knew who was having suicidal ideation, was at the Homewood Institute here in Guelph and for suicide risk. And I just said, hey, it's good to see you. I mean, they don't know that I know that they're there, but I just said, good to see you. Just to let them know that I'm happy that they're alive. And it's also helpful that in talking about it, if someone brings something up, you know, just letting them talk about their feelings You don't have to fix the problem. Just let them know that you care about what they are feeling, that you can be with them in their feelings, that you might even be willing to help them seek mental help if you are willing to do that. Just really giving them time to talk about how they feel can give them permission to think about different options and have the time that they need to think about alternative ways to move forward. Okay, so poll question number 3. Waiting. Most suicides happen suddenly without warning. True or false? Okay. Oh, 84-16. It's almost the same as the last time. So the answer is false. That verbal and or behavior warning signs do precede most suicides. However, they're not always apparent, and they're not always apparent to everyone. They don't always show up. They will often sort of be noticeable in hindsight, which of course is terrible. But it is helpful to learn what those warning signs can be, so you can be on the lookout for those. And we're going to make sure that we talk about those tonight, so you know what to be looking for if someone is at risk. Okay, question number 4. This is a tough one. People who die by suicide are selfish. True or false? Oh, 100%. Got that one right. Good for you guys. I knew this was a smart crew. So it can feel when people die by suicide that maybe they haven't thought about those around them. But people who die by suicide are often in extreme emotional pain. They're overwhelmed. They feel helpless. They feel hopeless, and they don't see their way forward. And that's what's so tragic about death by suicide. Yeah, so good for you guys, 100% there. Oh, here's one. Number 5, suicide rates are highest among adolescents and young adults. True or false? Okay, here we go. Oh, this was the biggest split, 32% to 68%. So I actually learned this a number of years ago, that the highest suicide rate happens between the ages of 40 to 59, and that is 45%. So I was surprised to know that people who are older have a higher rate of suicide. The second highest group is aged 15 to 39, which is 35%. And then those over 60 is 19%. So suicide is still the second largest reason for deaths for those aged 15 to 35, second to accidents. But yeah, it's the older middle-aged group where suicide rates are the highest. So sad but true. I think often the ones that we really hear about when people are younger, they're might be adolescents or young people. It's so devastating to hear about those losses, that it certainly has a big impact on us. Okay, number 6 statement. People who talk about suicide are looking for attention. True or false? Second last question, everybody. Yeah, I thought you guys might know that one. That's awesome. Rarely, so the answer is false. Rarely are people who are talking about suicide or suicidal thoughts, are they seeking attention? It can be a cry for help. And so it's really important that whenever someone talks about suicide or having thoughts of suicidal ideation, as we call it, or thoughts about self-harm, that we take it seriously and we listen to them and get them connected to some help. It's always important to take it seriously. Okay, last one. Once an individual is suicidal, they will remain that way. True or false? %. Awesome. You guys are awesome. So heightened suicide, you're correct. It is false. Heightened suicide risk is often short-lived and situation specific. We know that our emotions are transient, they can change, and thoughts can change as well. Our thoughts are not facts. Often people who have active suicidal ideation can gain a different perspective, even in a short amount of time. They can feel differently and go on to live a long and meaningful life. And it's really important to know. I wanted to share, just to give you an example of this. We're going to talk about this. Trevor's going to share his story a little bit later. I was part of a service group in Guelph, and I met one of the professionals that was part of the club there. I said hello to him a couple times, asked about his kids a couple times. And one day he phoned me out of the blue and said that he was having a really hard time. And he had been having some difficulty in his career. So he was working at a job that wasn't paying him a lot of money. He had saved a bunch of money, but he had calculated that he was going to run out of money in 2 months. He was drinking quite a bit. He was divorced and didn't want to bother his kids. So he really felt he had literally no one to turn to. And he called me, and I was thinking, oh my God, he's like, I called you because, basically I was the person who came to his mind. And I thought in my head, my goodness, I've seen this person a few times. I've, been friendly to them, and how really what I thought was how awful, that's kind of where his life had gotten to, that he had sort of isolated himself and was drinking by himself at night. And so we got together as, friends. He knew that what I did for a living, but we got together, we talked about things, we explored different avenues for career. We talked about maybe some people that he could ask for help. He didn't want to, but he saw some possibilities opening up. And years later, he gave me a call saying he was doing better and doing well. He'd gotten his life back on track. And just a couple weeks ago, I heard from a friend of his that he referred to me, and he passed along a message that he's doing very, very well. And so here's somebody who had gotten to a point in his life where he felt like there was no other options, and he found his way out of it. So, you know, that's why I think it's important to have this conversation. And that's why I think it's important to kind of just know that being friendly and saying hello to someone can make all the difference. And as I said, Trevor's going to tell maybe a little bit about his story. We're going to hear a little bit more about what signs to look for in interventions. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bonnie.
Thanks, Andrea. That was good to know and to remember. I wrote that down. We don't have to fix the problem. Just give them time to talk about how they're feeling, gives them options. Really good things to think about. All right, Nicole or Trevor, anything to add?
I was just a thought. When I do the ASIST training, we do talk about the statistics and that kind of a thing. And the one thing when we speak about statistics, what's important to understand is those are just reported statistics. You know, reported deaths by suicide, reported people who have thoughts of suicide. But there is a whole layer that exists of unreported that they estimate. If I remember correctly, I think it's anywhere from 5 to 25% higher, the number that you see. Add another 5 to 25, and the reason it's so vast is simply because of the fact that it's unreported. You don't know, and so there's layers upon layers from those numbers that Andrea didn't necessarily get into because we have limited time. But there's all these layers that exist, so the numbers are actually greater than what you're seeing, and it's something to always keep in mind. So that was just one thing I wanted to throw out there, just to help maybe realize the seriousness of our situation here in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nicole. So Trevor, we appreciate your willingness to share with us tonight. If you just want to start, you can tell us kind of some things that you went through in your life.
Thanks, Bonnie and Andrea and Nicole and everybody who's joined us tonight. This is fantastic. Having this topic brought forward at this time, I think, is particularly timely to put the word out there like suicide, and then the invitation, let's talk, I think is so important because in my experience and probably other people's experience as well, it's not something that we typically want to talk about. We may even think it's not helpful to talk about it. But I believe that it is. And I'm glad to be a part of this conversation. 9 years ago, I did not think that I would be alive and here to be able to participate in a conversation like this, but I thank the Lord I'm alive and well and able to be present. And I want to share with you just a slice of my life story. And I'm going to share this slice not because I particularly like to share the story. It's really a story I prefer not to talk about. But my life story, it has a dark chapter. And I want to share that chapter with you because I think it has the possibility of helping someone else. And it also sends a message of hope. If I was able to go through the dark chapter of my life and live through that to see new chapters written that are full of life and light and wholeness, then I believe that if it can happen for me, if it happened for me, it could happen for others as well, even though everyone's stories may be a little bit different. It was about 10 years ago when my family and I made a big move from working and living as missionaries in South America, returning to live and work back in Canada. And at the time we were moving back to Canada, I was already feeling tired and I'd say frayed around the edges. And when we got back, I secured a job as a courier during the week. I was preaching in churches on Sundays, and I had made some commitments to go and do some one-week seminars, helping to train Spanish-speaking pastors in Pennsylvania, in South Carolina, and in California. In the midst of all that, I accepted a new job, which I thought would help me to settle down and bring some new focus to my life. However, I was becoming increasingly emotional and anxious, and I found it harder and harder to go do the things that I said I would do. And I started to feel really stuck. In preparation for me to start my new job, my wife and I had sold our home and we had quit our jobs so that we would be ready to move. And everything came together as I came apart. I stopped being able to sleep, and after a few sleepless nights, I was prescribed sleeping pills, which I used for over 50 days or 50 nights. I lost my appetite and I didn't want to eat. My family doctor said that I was depressed, and at first I didn't believe it, and I only reluctantly took the medication that was prescribed, not really thinking that it would help. Before long, what started out as anxiety spiraled downward into negative thinking, and I got increasingly down on myself to the point I could not see anything positive. It was like I had become blinded to things that were good, while at the same time I had this high definition vision to be able to see all of my flaws and shortcomings. I couldn't even think a positive thought if I sat down with a pen and paper and tried to think of them. At nighttime, I just couldn't wait until morning, and then in the morning, I couldn't wait until night. There was no relief for my depressive feelings. At the outset, I was able to take a nice hot shower, and for 2 minutes at least, I could just feel normal. But as time went on, that did not even help. People said that exercise would be good to help combat depression, and my wife would encourage me to go out for walks. And I would leave the house and I'd be back about 15 seconds later, having only made it to the end of the driveway. I really didn't want to be around people. A pastor friend would call and ask if he could come over, and I would tell him on the phone, no, it's not a good day. And then my wife would find out what I had told him, and she would call him back and she'd say, please come over and take Trevor out for a walk. And maybe she didn't say it, but she could have said, Trevor is driving me crazy. And so he did, and numerous times came over, and even though I wasn't talkative, he would come over and take me out for a talk and try to have a talk. It was odd how extremely lonely I felt, even though I had loved ones around me. And by that point, my emotions had gone flat. I didn't cry. I just felt empty. And even when I tried to talk or make statements, it just sounded hollow. The world, as I saw it, it had no color and it didn't have any flavor. I couldn't make decisions, and the ones that I wanted to make were not helpful. And so I needed to rely on others, particularly my wife, as my external brain. And I would not have gone to the doctor or to a counselor or to a psychotherapist or to go even pick up my prescriptions unless my family helped me. I remember going with my daughter, getting sent out to go pick up my prescription for medication. And we got to the parking lot in front of the drugstore, got out of the car and started walking in. And I just thought, I can't do this. And I told my daughter, no, we'll just go home. And she just took me by the arm and turned me back toward the store and marched me into the store, and we picked up my prescription. By that point, I didn't like myself at all, and I felt that God didn't like me either. I'd lost a fair bit of weight, and my wife wondered if I was just slowly starving myself to death. And I had to wonder, no, maybe I was. That really I, in so many ways, would have just preferred to be dead and not have to experience what I was experiencing. Lots of different ways to hasten death went through my mind, and the ideas were appealing, but they were also very disgusting. And in my twisted thinking, I felt that God had a role to play in what was happening to me. And it seemed to me, or it felt like he had crushed me with one foot. And I was just waiting for the second foot to fall. And that would just be the end of my story. But I thought if I was going to die, it would probably be God just extinguishing my life. I carried around a crumpled piece of paper. It became a crumpled, well-worn piece of paper hidden away in the bottom of my pocket with a little note to my family that basically just said, sorry. And I actually did not tell my wife about that little note until today. So it's not, I've talked more about being depressed than about being suicidal, but I thought in the event God would extinguish my life, at least there'd be a little note in my pocket that would have a little greeting and say, sorry. But thankfully, that was not God's plan. In fact, I think God used my depression to help me gain a deeper understanding of his unconditional love and mercy, which was an important factor of helping me out of my depression. My wife, our kids, my parents, family, and friends didn't give up on me. I had the help of my family doctor, of a psychotherapist. I took medication for 2 years, and then with a doctor's supervision, I slowly decreased the dosage until that concluded. And as I got better, I was able to start to celebrate some things. Earlier on, I quietly celebrated throwing out that crumpled piece of paper that I'd carried in my pocket. I celebrated when the day came, I just noticed I had a laugh. I just had this belly laugh that it just felt so good to be able to laugh, and I hadn't done that for so long. And now 9 years later, I continue to celebrate so many things, particularly being able to enjoy life and to appreciate the beautiful things that God has for us in the world around us. And overall, it's just so good to have hope. So that's a little slice of where I've come from and where I am today.
Thank you, Trevor, for your transparency. It really helps give us a little insight into, what others have gone through. So thank you. Nicole, Andrea, is there anything you want to speak to?
Well, it's what stands out to me, what Trevor didn't really talk about is his courage and how difficult it is to fight back from depression. And it's not an easy thing. And so I don't know if he wants to speak to his journey and fight back to himself and feeling like himself, but it's a really tough journey. So Trevor, he's talking about a lot of courage and determination and fight that it takes. So I guess there's a question there for me about, what maybe motivated him to fight or, to keep going. What was that kernel? Was there a kernel of hope to hold on to, or was it family, or, what was it?
Yeah, I think for me, and there's more pieces to the story that I can probably even define myself. But I think elements like family that consistently love me and were particularly just overwhelmingly patient with me. I've always said that if my wife was going to divorce me, that was the time she would have left me, because I wasn't the man that she married. And so she stuck with me through that thick and thin, that difficult time, and helped me to get help. And then in the end, like, faith was a part of that, became a negative for a little while. Like I couldn't pray, I couldn't read the Bible without just seeing passages that felt terribly judgmental. But then as time went on, I was able to have a fresh appreciation through faith. And I think part of it, my own father demonstrate a great willingness to come to help me. And I thought, if my own father, my earthly father, is so willing to go really the extra mile to be able to try to help me as his son, how much more will my heavenly Father go the extra mile to help me out of this dark spot? So there was a number of factors, but from family, and then faith did eventually come alive again, and that generated hope as well. But it took a lot longer than I thought, and I ended up in a place I never thought I'd be when I was sick.
Nicole, anything to add?
I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, and for definitely being so open. And I love the fact that in your story, you talk about how you found that one anchor that kept you going, and that's actually super important. I'll be talking about that soon, but super important to have that one anchor that will keep you thinking towards life and keep you safe while you're struggling. And so thank you so much for being so open.
Yep.
So Trevor, you spoke about the importance of supports and resources that were available to you. You spoke about your family and friends. So we just want to draw attention to the crisis line number that is available in your chat tonight. As well, each of you will be receiving a list of resources via the email that you provided when you registered for the webinar. And we encourage you to keep those resources and feel free to share them with anyone that you feel they may benefit from them. So Nicole, please share with us what next steps would look like if you or someone you know is having thoughts of suicide.
I'm happy to do that. Training, suicide prevention and intervention training is actually one of my great passions because I believe in equipping people. But before I get into all of that, you know, why is it important to be trained? Why is it important to consider getting workshops and learning all about skills to interventions? The reality is anybody can have thoughts of suicide, right? It's not just the groups at risk that we tend to cluster with that tendency. It's absolutely anybody is prone to suicide. And so because of that fact, that means you can be walking in a mall, you could be shopping, you could be having coffee with a friend, and it's very possible that person that you're speaking with is going to have thoughts. The chances are that in your lifetime, you will encounter at least one, if not more, people who have had thoughts of suicide, and they're talking to you. And so if they open up to you, you need to know what to do, because what happens oftentimes is when we're not equipped, and because of the stigma that suicide carries, our knee-jerk reaction is a wrong way to handle it, because we will say something that just blurts out of our mouth. You know, things like, you know, you're not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? That'll shut somebody down right away, obviously. And, you know, just, or just panicking, saying, no, you've got so much to live for. Well, yes, but they don't see it that way. And so that is not the reaction that will draw a person to want to share any more with you. It'll shut them down. So suicide prevention and suicide intervention skills help you to know what to do and what to say. Just a couple more thoughts with regards to that. I just recently listened to a webinar, and what they were sharing with regards to statistics and the faith community is that 84% of pastors have been approached by a congregant with regards to having thoughts of suicide. And 25% of people say that they will approach their pastors. And 6 out of 10 pastors have no training and they don't know how to handle the situation. And with regards to people who have thoughts of suicides within the Christian community, up to 80% will leave the church because of the stigma that they feel with regards to, you know, being a Christian and having thoughts of suicide. And, you know, things like, you know, if I've got Christ living in me, how could I be thinking like this? What does that mean? Am I not saved? Or, you know, has God left me? You know, it just adds that whole realm. And so they feel so alone. And so we as a church community, yeah, because I'm assuming most people who are on this call are associated with a church one way or another, it's important for us to be trained. It's important for us to know what to do what to say, because of the fact that this is the reality. And, you know, suicide is one of those things that just hits a community like a bomb, and we need to know how to handle the situation appropriately. So anyways, so how do we do that? So there is the intervention training that I provide is called ASIST and Safe Talk. Now, ASIST and Safe Talk are curriculums that were basically developed by a company called Living Works Education. They're based out of Calgary, but they are recognized globally as the leading organization with regards to suicide intervention and prevention training. There are other trainings that exist, but this is one of the top, if not the top, from what I'm understanding. So what in the world does ASIST and Safe Talk mean? Well, ASIST is actually an acronym, and it stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. What it does, it's a full 2-day training, and it equips people with the confidence to be able to not only ask directly about suicide, and that is very important, to always ask directly about suicide. Like, are you talking about suicide? Are you going to going to have suicide? Or anyways, the reality is that it takes you from that. It takes you through a whole process of hearing their story, finding that turning point, that thing that will keep them alive for now, keep them safe for now. And it can be anything from family to a pet to a garden, like that one thing that just they can't seem to, if they think, if I'm not here, who's going to take care of this? It's that but in a conversation. It's that pause in the conversation. And then taking that and getting them to agree to stay safe for now and to create a safety plan so that, they'll get the help that they need. So that's what ASIST does. So it's the whole intervention. Safe Talk is actually something different. It's a half day. And it's basically, so SAFE stands for Suicide Alertness for Everyone. And then TALK is an acronym that's basically tell, ask, listen, and keep safe. And what it essentially is just that first part of the whole ASIST. So it equips people to be more suicide alert and to not be afraid to ask the question. So if somebody says yes, they're thinking about suicide, then they will take that person and get them in contact with somebody who's either ASIST trained or a counselor or somebody who can actually complete the intervention. So in a community, if you want a suicide safer community, what you want are a few people who are ASIST trained and a whole lot of people who are Safe Talk trained, because you want a whole lot of suicide alert helpers within a community. So that those are the type of trainings that are available, and they equip you and they teach you, the kind of signs to look for. Some of them that you can look for, just to touch base on that a little bit. In ASIST, we talk about and Andrea made comments towards that kind of thing. And these are things that people tend to do, and there's many different types of invitations, but people tend to do when they are having thoughts of suicide or have decided that they are going to complete suicide. And these can be anything from actions to physical appearance, to the words they say, to feelings. So something like, giving away your possessions, things that matter to them, withdrawing, loss of interest in either sports or leisure, misuse of drugs or alcohol. When it comes to words, you'll hear things like, all my problems will end soon. You'll hear things like, no one can do anything to help me now. I just can't take it anymore. I can't do anything right. I'm a burden to everyone. When it comes to physical, a lack of interest in appearance, the disturbed sleep, change or loss of appetite, And then feelings, they're feeling desperate or they're angry. And not everybody's, like Andrea said, not everybody's depressed. There's all kinds of different feelings. There's guilt, you know, worthless, those kinds of things. So those are some of the signs, and there's so much. So when you start seeing anything that's mimics any of that, it's good to ask. And, you know, worst case scenario, you're having lunch with somebody, you think maybe they're having thoughts of suicide. You ask them directly, are you talking about suicide? And they say no. That's it. And then maybe they'll clarify, no, I'm not there. I'm just, you know, feeling this, that. Or if they get angry and defensive, then you might be sure that yes, suicide is on their mind. They're not ready to talk about it. But by asking the question, what you've done is you've told them, I am willing to have that conversation when you are ready to have that conversation. So that's what intervention training and prevention training essentially helps you to do. Now there are online trainings, but you have to understand what's available online through LivingWorks. It really is just the preparatory. It's not complete. It will equip you, of course, to a certain degree. They're excellent, but it really is just you know, it's called LivingWorks Start, and it's exactly that. It's a start. It's a start of your training journey. So LivingWorks Starts. It's a 90-minute online, and I would encourage, if that's what you're looking for, that's a great place to start. And for those in ministry, LivingWorks has just come out with one called Faith. It's intended for ministry leaders. It's about 5 or 6 hours long. It is interactive, and it helps leaders to be prepared. And so again, it's a good first step, but Safe Talk and ASIST are what I would recommend for anybody to take, because we need to be ready to have these conversations, because they will just fall on your lap unexpectedly. And that's the reality. And I'd rather to have people equipped and ready than react and you know, shut down the conversation before it can really be had. And I hope that was encouraging. I don't mean to be discouraging, but you know, the more we know, the more we're educated, the better equipped we are to be able to handle these kinds of situations.
Thanks, Nicole. I liked how you said suicide alert helpers. Just being aware of those phrases and things that we can be attentive to, and just recognize as, hey, maybe that's something, maybe this person does need more help, and we can, you know, explore a little further. Andrea, do you have anything more to add to that?
One of the things that's a little bit, I would say, counterintuitive is that people who are demonstrating or having suicidal ideation or thoughts of self-harm, we often, or at least many of the people that I know, often think about, you know, they're withdrawing, or they're commenting on how life is troubling, or, you know, they're sad, or there's something along those lines, like a negative feeling. And for some people who are having self-harm or suicidality or depression, they actually could increase their wanting to be connected and connecting to people. And so what I say to people, to be on the lookout for changes in behavior. So if people are usually people who isolate, they might be socializing more. People who socialize might isolate. And so if you see or know of someone in your relational circle that just seems to be sort of acting different than what you're used to seeing them act, or seeing them do what's normal for them, you can just ask open-ended questions like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You know, how's life these days? I'm a little bit stressed. How's your week going? And just kind of see, be that safe person for them to open up to in whatever they're feeling.
Yeah. And I think, though, if I can interject, the important thing too is to realize you're not going to solve their problems. They're not necessarily looking for you to solve their problems. They're just wanting to talk. Oftentimes, they just want to talk.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we're just going to transition to some of the questions that have been in the chat. So the first question is, what's the difference between self-harm and suicide?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
No, Andrea or Nicole?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Self-harm is sort of a broad term, so it's usually referred to things like cutting, or there's a lot of different behaviors that self-harming kind of includes, and it's usually doing harm to yourself. The vernacular does kind of include suicide, but typically we use it to refer to kind of less serious kinds of self-harm. Not so fatal as suicide, whereas suicide is considered dying by suicide.
Okay. Thank you. Nicole, we've had a request for your stats again, specifically the ones of how many people go to their pastor. Do you have those?
I do. Let me find it very quickly.
Now, if anyone else has any questions, for sure you can add it to the chat now and we can ask the panelists. So Nicole?
25%. 25% have said that they will speak to their pastors.
Okay.
84% of pastors have been approached, and 6 out of 10 pastors don't have any training in this thing. And that's because in seminary, it's not really something that, you know, when you think about it, that's not what they're part of the curriculum necessarily, especially for pastors who are maybe a little more seasoned. I haven't been to seminary this year, so I don't know if they've changed their curriculum, but yeah.
Okay. So is self-harm usually a first step to suicide?
Not usually. The statistics on self-harm, that could be Connie's going to be making work for herself. That could be a topic for another night. Self-harm is extremely prevalent in adolescent girls mainly, and you know, the typical progression is self-harm and then eating disorders. It has a lot to do with identity and sort of identity crisis and finding oneself. And people at risk for self-harm are usually people who have a high risk or a high tolerance for physical pain and a low tolerance for emotional pain. And so they find that by cutting or some of the other kinds of self-harm that people do, anyway, I won't get into that. It can be gruesome and upsetting, but they find that it gives them something to focus on rather than their emotional pain. So we usually consider them to, you know, they can have some overlap, but I usually consider them separately. Yeah.
Okay. So are there resources you would recommend for friends, family who have lost people to suicide? Now, I haven't seen the resource list that's going to be sent out, but do we have any resources included on that list?
I think Julie was going to send some out. If Julie doesn't have some on that list, Julie, give me a call and I'll give you some resources to add to the list, or Nicole will have some as well.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I could
Trevor
just
might even, yeah.
there as well. It's in our church context. There's a program we run called Grief Share. I know it addresses grief in a variety of ways, but we have had people who have experienced suicide in their families or in their connections that have found that helpful as well. And I believe there's information about that if you just search Grief Share, or in our local church website, you could find information about that also.
Okay.
One thing that I will say is that I don't think has been mentioned tonight, that often the one thing that's different about death by suicide for families and survivors afterwards is a feeling of anger and a feeling of guilt. And those two feelings aren't always part of a loss. But guilt comes, sometimes people feel badly that they weren't able to kind of intervene or see the signs, and anger because people wish they were still alive. And so those are feelings that Trevor was mentioning, Grief Share or programs like that. When there's a group that's specific to suicide loss, you're able to talk about those two feelings specifically that are very common when there's a suicide involved.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have any stats on clergy suicide?
Nicole may have some stats, or Trevor, but any of the stats that I've seen in referring to clergy or Christians, we don't usually find that the statistics are very different, with clergy or Christians and the general population. Clergy might have, more depression for some reasons that, again, we won't get into maybe tonight, but it's lonely being a leader. And man, it's like pastors have a target on their back. It's like having 300 shareholders every week give you their opinion about everything you've done that Sunday, which is great, isn't it, Trevor? It's very welcomed. But so far, I haven't seen any stats that show any significant differences in clergy or Christians and the general population.
Okay. So I have found this conversation very insightful and rewarding. I just want to thank the panelists, but I just want to give you a quick opportunity. Is there any last thoughts that you want to leave with us? Andrea, if you want to, anything for us?
Yeah, I think that, it's such a weighty topic and sometimes a scary topic to talk about. And I would really encourage people to focus on, learning to grow your, not appetite, but your ability, your comfortability to listen to people when they're having a hard time. And for most of us, it's hard to listen to people when they're talking about feeling lonely or sad, or, I think because we would like them to feel better, we, kind of try to say, well, it's not so bad, or, we try to, switch it. So I would really encourage people just to try to be that safe person that people can go to and talk to and share their feelings with, whatever their feelings might be, and to let them know that you can be with them in that, and just work on sort of being that safe person and comfortable having people share their feelings with you, whatever those feelings might be.
Thank you, Andrea. And Nicole, last thoughts?
I would agree with everything that Andrea said. That's absolutely right. And I would encourage you to, if it's something that you feel that you want to learn more, look through the Living Works website to find trainings on Safe Talk or ASIST, or even on their START online program. You can never be over-equipped, and the more you learn, the more comfortable you become with the topic, and the easier it will be to have those conversations and to be that active listener while somebody is sharing their stories with you.
Okay, Thank you. And Trevor?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think tonight you've just been quickly introduced to a whole lot of good ideas and good resources, and encourage you to take advantage of all of those resources that are available, whether that's talking to a counselor, talking to a medical doctor, going to a psychotherapist, talking to your pastor. And for all of those who are dealing with suicide or have had suicidal thoughts or accompanying those who are suicidal, I would add to that, that as much as all of us as individuals, as fellow human beings would want to do all that we can to help anyone, and boy, it'd just be so nice sometimes if we could just reach down inside a heart or inside a head and make those adjustments that are necessary for someone to feel well. I say, and when I was sick, I just felt it was so lonely. There were people who cared for me, but they just couldn't really understand what was going on inside my heart. And I wasn't able to express that well. And so how wonderful it is to think of exercising a bit of faith, or as we know people who are dealing with suicide, to exercise our faith in saying, you know, there is someone who's created you. God has created you. He knows your heart even better than you do. And he is particularly equipped. God is able to work in those deep, inner, dark, scary places that we don't even understand ourselves, and to help bring light and order and encouragement. And so that we can use faith and prayer and accompanying people, encourage them to look to God, to find help in ways that can even go beyond what a doctor can do or a counselor. And so I would encourage people to take full advantage of all of the resources that are available, and not underestimate what God can do in ways in the invisible realm that we can't even see and measure.
Thank you, Trevor. Do you mind just closing us with prayer?
No, I'd be glad to. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that we can come together tonight, each person where they are in their life circumstances, in their family, and in their friend groups and community. You know the challenges that are being faced, perhaps people tonight who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, or they know people who are struggling managing life's challenges, and they're wondering if there's any hope. And we pray tonight that you would meet with each one right where they are, and just bring reassurance of hope and of help, and that the things that have been shared tonight, I pray that you would help them to resonate in people's hearts and minds, and that they would be able to pick up on the practical tips and resources that are available to provide good help for them in the days ahead. I pray that you would work in people's lives from the inside out. I pray that you would bring life and light deep into people's hearts and minds. I pray that you would resurrect those dying and dead spots in people's lives, and that you would infuse peace into those places where there's distress. Please comfort each caregiver, each person who's concerned for the life of their loved ones. Give them wisdom, give them patience, and extraordinary strength. We pray that you would be with those who grieve, those who have lost loved ones, or are accompanying people who have changed so much because of depression or mental illness that they're having. It's just hard to see people around them suffer. So please be their comfort. Please bridge the divide between the brokenness in our world and the wholeness that you want to give. And I pray that the peace that only you can provide, that peace which passes all understanding, I pray that it would guard our hearts and our minds, both now and forevermore. Thank you for this precious time we've been able to share together as a community, and have you in the midst of us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And I just want to thank Connie Harper, the parish nurse at Wainfleet, for coordinating and organizing the event, as well as thank you to Julie Adams for your technical Zoom support. So thanks everyone. Take care and stay safe. Have a good night.